Welcome to our new series of interviews with Father Bob. The teenagers of St. Peter Parish will be interviewing Father Bob every month, asking him questions that have been on their minds. Stay tuned each month for a new video. Here is the next of many interviews to come.
I have a few questions about priesthood. How do you become a priest?
Well, first of all, it's kind of one of those things where we believe that God calls a person to become a priest. So they respond, but you just don't proclaim yourself a priest. You have to get ordained a priest. It's a sacrament. And so the bishop sort of, through his other priests, sort of discerns, figures out if this is really of God or not. And so normally they do that through what's called the seminary. And so we go to school, basically, and at seminary you learn about things that will help you become a priest. Normally there's a college program and then graduate school. You also pray and deepen your life of prayer. And finally you do stuff. You go to parishes, you do field education is what we call it. And as you do those things, and the people that teach you, the faculty and bishop, they kind of discern whether your call is kind of authentic, right from God. And if they think it is, then they'll ordain you. Then you receive the sacrament of holy orders, and then you become a priest. There's lots of different kinds of priests. Most of the priests that you probably know relate to, they're called parish priests. They're diocesan priests who work for the diocese. And so they work in parishes and churches. But some teach in schools and some do other sorts of things, campuses, and as chaplains and hospitals and other sorts of things. So that's kind of how you do it. You go to school and you sort of discern, sort of figure it out with others, and then you get ordained, receive the sacrament of holy orders.
What is it like being a priest?
Well, no 2 days are alike. There's always, as a priest working in a parish, there's always different things that happen. Some days are very, very busy, and you serve people in their needs. Sometimes it's joyful occasions. People are having their children baptized or they're getting married. Sometimes it's sad occasions. People are burying a loved one. Sometimes it's teaching in schools or in the parish school of religion. Sometimes it's visiting the sick in the hospitals or in their homes. A lot of times there's stuff that's called administration, making sure that the bills get paid and the buildings get fixed and the parking lot is decent, and you have to hire people and sometimes fire people. There's all sorts of things. If you go, sometimes it's just visiting a sporting event or going to a banquet. There's no 2 days alike. Sometimes it's just wearing a collar and running into somebody at the store who wants to ask you a question, and these sorts of things. So it's great variety, great joy. Some days are very tiring. Some days are kind of light. But that's a little bit about what it's like being a priest. At times it's very joyful. At times it's very trying. But hopefully it's always good. And hopefully if we keep Jesus at the center, because that's where he's supposed to be, then we help everybody, including ourselves, along the path to heaven.
Why can't priests or nuns get married?
Well, basically it's the tradition of the church that those who follow Jesus as his ordained special friends to serve the church remain single. Jesus himself was single. St. Peter said, "We gave up all to follow Jesus." And Jesus himself spoke of being single for the kingdom of God as a gift, as did St. Paul. So taking that as kind of the basis, there's an ancient tradition that those who ordained remain single for the Lord. Now, shortly after Jesus died and rose and the church began, there began to be women who also wanted to give up all and follow Jesus. And so they became consecrated religious, we call them, or nuns. And they too remained single. And the reason being for both priests and nuns is so that our minds and our hearts can be totally focused on Jesus and not sort of divided, among many different interests. Now, it turns out that we're all a little bit divided. Our minds and hearts are on Jesus, but it's also to give us more freedom to do the work of Jesus. So it's a little bit easier for me as a single person to do the work that the Lord has for me to do. I don't have to, my evenings are free to go to parish meetings and to do counseling and to, visit the hospital. It's a little easier to do those things when I'm not so worried about, like, I got to take care of my wife, my children, I got to make sure that I have enough money and everything's okay for them. And there's just a greater freedom to do the work of the Lord. It sort of helps us to be undistracted. Now, is there sacrifice in not being married? There certainly is. But ask your parents, is there sacrifice in being married? Yes, there is, and there's no life without sacrifice, and really no life worth living without people making sacrifices for a greater good, and so that really gives us joy. Each life has its own sacrifices and challenges. So, not getting married can look as an escape for some people. For other people, getting married can look like a path to happiness. Really, Christ is the path to happiness. We need to really listen to Him, whether that's being single or married, whether it's being ordained or consecrated person, and follow that path. And that's the path to real happiness.
Why can't women lead masses like priests?
Okay, that's a difficult question. Why can't women be priests? Basically, is what it is, because only priests can lead mass. So, why can't women be ordained priests? And basically, we follow the tradition of the church here. Jesus, who seemed to have a unique relationship with women in the Bible, in the story of Martha and Mary sits at the feet of Jesus and listens to Him and learns from Him while Martha does all the busy stuff around. Martha complains about that, whatever. But the fact that Mary sits at the feet of Jesus tells us that she was a disciple. And there are other indications, even in the travels of St. Paul and in the travels of Jesus, that women were especially helpful in assisting in certain ways. In fact, the first person to see Jesus raised from the dead was St. Mary Magdalene, a woman. The apostles weren't there. They saw him later, obviously. He showed them something. But, so, there's this uniqueness. And yet, with all of that, He didn't send them out. He didn't commission them. He didn't ordain them. And in the early church, they followed that tradition up until the present day. Now, there are other ways that women have assisted the church, sometimes in very dramatic ways. As women religious, assisting the poor, even preaching the gospel, or affecting the whole leadership of the church. St. Catherine of Siena in the 13th, 14th centuries, actually, went and had a little interview with the Pope, who was living a few hundred miles away from Rome in Avignon, France, and she told him, if you don't get back to Rome, you may go to hell. So he followed, he listened to her. I mean, women have always had a voice in the church, a very important voice, but it's not a matter of being ordained or not. Sometimes we think, well, gee, saying Mass, that makes them better or more important. It doesn't. We're all important, whether we're ordained or not ordained, or married or single for the Lord. We're all very important, and we need to follow the path that the Lord has for us. And so that's it in a long way. I think, too, there's a couple other things. One, at the Eucharist, Jesus, is to be present in and through the priest, and so we believe in sacramental signs that they should reveal something. So Jesus was a man, perhaps priest at the altar should be met. And the other thing is that women have their own dignity and vocation. Especially, women can do some things men can't do. One thing very special, in particular, give birth to children. And we don't want to, again, I think that's just part of the character of womanhood that is very important. And maybe could get a little muddled if we talked about ordination. So, in any event, that's it in a nutshell.